The sister of the Thorn career has arrived for Kerillian, bringing a new playstyle to her Elfie table. We're going to take a look at it with her new skills, talents and weapons. So the fourth career for Kerillian, bringing something different for her, as most of her careers are focused on doing the damage or maybe being a little bit supportive, but not really ever crowd controlling very much. But this career really brings some great crowd control for her, as well as the healing and support for herself and the team. Overall, it's probably more of a melee focused career than a ranged one, but there is still some strong ranged attacks with the new weapons to be used. One of the most powerful tools at her disposal though is her career skill Thornwake, basically the ability to summon a bush out of nowhere. This essentially provides a wall that the enemies cannot get through. They'll either have to go around it or hack their way through it, while you and your teammates will be able to move through it, albeit at reduced speed. This can provide some incredible crowd control for buying your team some breathing room, either cutting off paths so the enemy simply can't get through, or creating a choke point to funnel the enemies where you want them. It also does a bit of damage when it erupts out the ground and can block some missile attacks. Now to her two new weapons. The first one, the Briar Javelin. Not too bad of a base skin on this. It's a melee and missile weapon, which all of its attacks are thrusty stabs, so lots of armor piercing damage to be had for this, great against those heavily armored specials and elites. The attacks can also of course be charged up for some extra damage as well. The only downside is that you can't block with this as a melee weapon, so you do have to be careful and ready with your dodge. This is because the alternate attack is a javelin throw, obviously. Some nice damage and piercing attacks on this, and also infinite ammo. You can hold R to recharge them and use them as much as you like. So a decent option for sniping elites and specials from range, or getting up close and just stabbing them right in the fucking eyes. Overall, the weapon feels pretty nice to use. Honestly, I'm not much of an elf player, but I do enjoy hoiking a big weighty javelin around. It is quite a fun weapon to have out most of the time, throwing javelins around all over the place. At least until hordes come along, then you do have to be careful because you can't block with it. Then it's probably best to just keep it in reserve until a special comes along and you can just quickly whip it out, hoik a javelin in their face and then go back to your melee weapon. Or if you happen to be close to the specials or elites, you can just go in for the stabby stabs. Great for wearing down those heavily armored storm vermin and chaos warriors, but again you do have to be very ready to jump out the way of their attacks because you won't be able to block them. So yeah, a nice weapon, even from a non-elf player. I do find this a pretty fun weapon to use. Of course though, it is shorter in the range, so there is that to consider. If you like having the long range capabilities, this might not be the weapon for you. A nice one for the short to mid-range special and elite killer though. And her other new weapon, the Deep Wood Staff, which is basically a bunch of twigs strung together with a stone on top. Now this actually comes with a ranged attack which fires 4 quick, very accurate little darts that are fairly good against the unarmored targets, but maybe not so good against the heavy armor. You can also notice the green meter there that is filling up the more we use it, so you are limited. You can't just go nutso because you will overheat, hurt yourself and disable the weapon for a while, so you do have to manage that. And the alternate attack I can't show you on this dummy, but it does this. It levitates an enemy. Any kind of enemy except for bosses can be rendered useless for a fair few seconds. Again, either buying you some breathing room from that enemy or simply allowing your team to mash them up safely. So this weapon, while still providing a ranged attack, also provides that very strong crowd control of disabling a single enemy for a short time. Especially useful, of course, on specials and elites. You can do this to a Chaos Warrior, you can do it to a Rattling Gunner, a Blight Stormer, whatever. You can just whip them up in the air and leave them there and kill everything else around and then finish it off later, or kill it while it's in the air when it can't attack you back. So this is the weapon to bring if you really want to go all in on the crowd control. You've got that Thornwake bush summoning ability as well, so you can combo those two things up for some supreme crowd control power. The downside of it all is that you have that meter to manage, so you do need to be careful. You'll be switching to your melee weapon quite often to let that meter cool down. So this career and this weapon really providing Kerillian with some of the best crowd control she has available. The lift disable on this weapon is especially powerful, especially if you're under heavy ranged attack from maybe a Rattling Gunner in the distance or even a Warp Fire Thrower. You can just throw them up in the air while you deal with all the stuff in melee around you and then deal with that rattling later. So it can buy you that great bit of breathing room from heavy ranged attacks and with melee situations too. If you pull a patrol that you really didn't mean to and you're not prepared for it, you can throw 3 or 4 of them up in the air, disable them for a while, buying the team time to deal with the rest of them and then killing those levitated ones a bit later. And not forgetting you'll have the Thornwake crowd control with you as well, so just a gargantuan amount of crowd control she can dish out, especially with her passive ability, which let's take a look at some of the talents and abilities that she has on this class. So as I mentioned, not much of an elf player myself, so I haven't really leveled her. I've only got a few of the talents, so I'm not going to speak too much about them. I will mouse over everything if you want to pause the video and read things though. Her passive ability is a highlight, allows a free use of her career skill every 60 seconds, so more bushes to spawn up essentially, as well as the ones that will recharge naturally through the bar. And then of course the career skill, summoning that bush, which does do some eruption damage on it. You can also apply bleed and things to it, but that does make it smaller with some of the talents, as you'll see in a second. So those two things really aiding to her crowd control powers. Then she has a murder of spites. This will give her 50% more damage to wounded targets, depending on their remaining health. So just a bit of damage output for her there. A sustenance of leechings. This is pretty nice. Whenever another party member receives temporary health while at full health, Kerillian gains temporary health instead. So that's a nice way to keep herself healed. And then an attendance of munificence. All healing received by the party increased by 25%. So that's nice party heals to go around for everybody, increasing her role as a healer as much as she is crowd control. Now for the talents, as I said, I haven't unlocked them all, I haven't used them all, so I can't comment on them too much, but do pause the video if you want to have a read. Seems like she's got some good options for, obviously, some healing, as that is a big part of her role. Seems like she can have some good stuff with critical strikes, so she can gain temporary health from that, which will couple up with some nice dual fast weapons, as well as critical strikes applying bleed, and also getting some free critical strikes with certain talents. So some nice stuff to play with there. You can also mess around with Thornwake. As I said, you can make it apply bleed, you can make it last longer. There's also a few more damage-focused talents as well, so a nice variety for her. Overall, giving a really nice different playstyle to the elf, although I'm pretty sure it's not going to fit most elf players because the class isn't about running off ahead and trying to get all the kills and glory by yourself. So most elf players, obviously very greedy, they're not going to be into that, right? They're just not going to be... They don't care. They don't want to help people. They're elves. Really, this is a terrible class. It's completely out of lore. Never would an elf help another race. Or should I say a human playing as an elf would never help anybody. But I jest. It is a nice class though. As a non-elf player, I do quite like it and maybe would play elf with this class, especially for the Thornwake ability. I do like being able to block off paths and using that kind of crowd control. That's really my kind of thing, so I do like that as an ability. But there we go, the sister of the Thorn class for Kerillian. What do you reckon? Have you been playing it yourself? Have you got a sweet build? Feel free to drop it in the comments. It's a nice change of pace for the elf with a great team support role. A couple of nice new, both useful weapons as well, I think. I probably prefer the Javelin myself because I'm more of a special and elite killer kind of player. So I'd still be able to bring the heals and the crowd control with Thornwake, but also keep the special killing up with that Javelin, which obviously I can't do so well with the Deepwood Staff because the armor piercing on it isn't so great with the ranged attack. The lift ability though is insanely powerful. As you can see, you can do it on more than one enemy at a time, so it's just really got so much potential there, especially with things like Plague Monks and Berserkers that can be hard to deal with as you can't attack them back yourself, usually. So yeah, there we go. Hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the future.